Currently, there are 6 exemption categories, but they're not standardly applied and may be too narrow. Review of the categories with clarification so that investigators could readily apply whether or not their project fit. Consideration of expanding the categories, and all the expansions would still be subject to the data security and information protection standards. They keep hammering at this over and over and over. Data security, data security, data security. And we've solved the problem with HIPAA. Just use the HIPAA standards. Next. Category 2, this is the most commonly approved and proposed type of research at Grand Valley. Surveys, focus groups, observation of public behavior, interviews. Research involving educational tests, surveys, interviews, public behavior is exempt unless the information that you collect is recorded in such a manner that human subjects can be identified, either directly or because there's a link someplace, and there's a risk that the information you collected from those identified individuals could place them at harm if it fell into the wrong hands. If those 2 conditions apply, the survey, the interview, the observation group, the focus is not exempt. It requires a higher level of review, expedited, maybe even full board, depending on what you're talking about. Proposal, eliminate these 2. Eliminate that protection. Why? Because it's an informational risk. And you've already solved that problem by complying with the HIPAA standards. Next slide. Expanded category 2. If the study is limited to competent adults, then delete the limitations. Delete the limitations. Next slide. So now this is what it's going to look like. Research involving any educational test, any cognitive diagnostic aptitude or achievement test of any sort, any survey about any subject matter, any interview or observation of public behavior about any subject matter, whether or not you collect personal identifiers, is excused. Why? Because you're dealing with competent adults and you got their consent. You told them what you were doing. It's on them, their risk. If they tell you dangerous information and they trust you and you're not trustworthy, too bad. Nobody but the researcher would need to review it. Next slide. Result of the proposal. If the subjects are competent adults, excused research has no limitation based on identifiability of the information being collected or the nature. It redounds to the researcher's own professional integrity to uphold the security and protection of the participants. The IRB functions by relying 99.9% on the trust of the researchers doing what they say they're going to do the way they say they're going to do it when they propose research to us to review. The concern here is that nobody will ever give a second look to the proposed research in the excused categories. So the researcher says, well, what I want to do falls under one of these excused categories, and I know what it requires to be compliant with the data security, and I will be. And so I'm just going to tell somebody, the IRB office maybe, that I'm going to do this research. And I fill out a 1-page short form that basically says what I'm doing, what category it fits in, and when I'm going to start, and they just file it. And nobody looks at it. Nobody says, well, you know, you're collecting pretty sensitive information here with identifiers. Do you have a plan to encrypt it? Do you have a plan to limit the access of who gets to handle that data? Nobody gets that review. Nobody any longer has the function of doing that second check on the researcher's proposed plan. And that's what the IRB does now.
Well, you're saying that the IRB does that now, but then wouldn't it also fall on the institution to make sure that that secondary analysis there and that, you know, their researchers are being trained and that they're aware of all of the requirements and all of that? So, I mean, that would really then require resources on the part of the institutions to put that into place.
Yeah, if you're eliminating in most cases in Grand Valley, if you're eliminating the 1 second look that proposals get, I mean, you know, authorizing officials are required to authorize all proposed research from their unit. How many of them do you think read every word on every page of every proposal? they rely very heavily on the trustworthiness of their faculty, right? And if it's a faculty advisor of a student-led protocol, how much does that faculty advisor really investigate the content and procedures of those proposed research projects? Well, for some faculty, very much. They're deeply involved. For others, they say, oh yeah, no, that's fine. It looks good. At least top half of the first page looks good. No second look on the excused category. So I have a little concern with this, if you can't tell. All right, additional types of studies under excused, because they think the too narrow exempt categories. Certain types of social and behavioral research that's conducted with competent adults that involve specific types of benign interventions beyond educational tests, surveys, focus groups, interviews, and similar procedures that are commonly used and known to have virtually no risk to subjects and prior reviewed as little to increase protections. Why require it? Just make them excused. And with all of those characteristics present, I don't have much of a problem. Known to have almost no risk, commonly used, but they don't happen to fall in this narrow group of types of activities, why not excuse them? As long as you're confident the researcher got it right when the researcher was the only one looking at it.